Welcome to our deep dive into the world of sensitive strivers. We're going to be exploring Melody Walding's book, Trust Yourself, which unpacks this fascinating concept.
Yeah, this combination of high sensitivity and ambition. If you identify as someone who, feels things deeply but also has this drive to achieve, or maybe you know someone who fits that bill, this deep dive is for you.
Exactly. And so let's get into it. What defines a sensitive striver? Wilding uses this really cool acronym, STRIVE, to kind of outline these key qualities.
And the S stands for sensitivity.
Okay.
But it's more than just, being easily affected by things. Sensitive strivers are highly perceptive.
Yeah.
They process information deeply and they notice these subtleties that others might miss. And
Interesting.
this can be a real asset. It allows them to truly understand people and situations on a much deeper level.
That makes a lot of sense. Next, we have T, which stands for thoughtfulness.
Right.
And I imagine this kind of goes hand in hand with sensitivity.
Exactly. Sensitive strivers are incredibly reflective, so they carefully consider all these different perspectives before acting. And this thoughtfulness makes them amazing problem solvers.
Okay.
They're always looking for the best approach.
But I wonder if this tendency to kind of think deeply can sometimes be a downside. Is there potential, for it to kind of backfire?
Certainly. Overthinking is a common struggle for sensitive strivers. That inner monologue can sometimes spiral into self-criticism and doubt, which can hinder their ability to move forward.
And now we have the R, which is for responsibility, which most people would consider a very positive quality.
It is.
How does that play out in a sensitive striver?
Well, sensitive strivers are known for being exceptionally dependable and committed to doing things right. They often go above and beyond to fulfill obligations,
All right.
which, while admirable, can lead to taking on too much and ultimately risking burnout.
And Wilding actually talks about Alicia, who nearly burned out from just shouldering excessive responsibility at work. It's a great illustration of how these strengths, when amplified, can sometimes become a liability.
Absolutely. Alicia's experience just underscores the importance of recognizing these patterns early on and learning how to effectively manage them.
That's really interesting. So then we go to I, which stands for inner drive.
Right.
And it seems like this is at the heart of what makes a sensitive striver, well, strive.
It really is. Sensitive strivers possess this powerful inner drive. They set high standards for themselves and they genuinely seek to make a real difference in the world. And it's this internal fire that fuels their ambitions.
I wonder, though, if that intense inner drive ever clashes with their sensitive nature. I imagine it could create a lot of internal pressure.
It definitely can.
Hmm.
That persistent push to achieve, combined with their sensitivity to setbacks, can lead to a relentless cycle of striving and often neglecting their well-being in the process.
No.
So finding that balance is crucial.
And next we have V for vigilance. What distinguishes vigilance in a sensitive striver?
Well, they're incredibly observant, picking up on details that others often miss. And this attention to detail, it serves them really well,
Right.
particularly in tasks requiring precision and thoroughness.
So I can see how that would be such a valuable asset in many professions.
Right.
But is there a flip side to this heightened awareness? Could it be too much?
Of course. This vigilance can turn into anxiety, especially in unpredictable or unfamiliar environments.
I see that.
Constantly being on alert, scanning for problems can be really mentally exhausting and just heighten stress levels.
And finally, we reach E for emotionality,
Yes,
which is obviously a big trait
a defining trait.
of a sensitive striver. So how does this intense emotionality kind of shape their experiences?
Sensitive strivers, they experience emotions on a deeper level. This includes joy, sorrow, you name it.
Okay.
And while this capacity for feeling really enriches their lives, it also presents unique challenges.
I can imagine like handling criticism or setbacks would be especially difficult.
Absolutely. Negative feedback can really sting for sensitive strivers.
Hmm.
This sensitivity, combined with their drive to succeed, can fuel a fear of failure and hold them back from truly going after what they want.
So now that we've kind of gone over these strive qualities,
Mhm.
I want to dig into a concept Wilding calls the honor roll hangover.
Yes.
What exactly does that mean?
It's basically this vicious cycle that many sensitive strivers fall into.
Yeah.
They're constantly striving for perfection, prioritizing everyone else's needs, and just pushing themselves to the limit. And this pattern, although often driven by good intentions, can be truly exhausting and lead to a diminished sense of self.
That's incredibly relatable.
Mm,
Could you elaborate on the specific behaviors that kind of contribute to this cycle?
sure. Wilding identifies three key factors. The first is perfectionism,
Okay.
this unrelenting need to get everything just right, which makes it really hard to celebrate accomplishments and just breeds a sense of inadequacy.
Which kind of blends right into that second factor,
Sure.
imposter syndrome, where despite achievements, a lot of sensitive strivers feel like a fraud.
Right. They downplay their successes and they attribute accomplishments to external factors rather than acknowledging their own abilities.
Right.
And this just undermines their confidence and perpetuates the cycle.
And the third element you mentioned was the difficulty in managing emotions.
Yes.
How does that play into the honor roll hangover?
Well, because they experience emotions so intensely, sensitive strivers can feel like they're constantly on an emotional roller coaster. Stress easily overwhelms them, regulating their moods becomes a challenge, and even minor setbacks can feel catastrophic.
And Wilding gives some very compelling examples in the book, like constantly worrying about work or being really self-critical, which I think shows how the honor roll hangover kind of goes beyond just external achievements and delves into this deeper emotional struggle.
It definitely highlights that while a sensitive striver may appear successful on the outside, they could be battling significant internal turmoil.
And before we move on, I think it's important to address something that may be coming up for some of our listeners. They might be thinking, well, hold on, this sounds a lot like anxiety.
It's a valid point, and Wilding acknowledges that there's some overlap between the traits of a sensitive striver and someone experiencing anxiety.
But it's important to make a distinction.
Absolutely.
Being a sensitive striver doesn't mean you automatically have an anxiety disorder.
Right.
Sensitivity is a personality trait. Anxiety is a mental health condition. And that distinction is important.
Exactly. And while some sensitive strivers may also struggle with anxiety, it's important to remember that they're not the same thing.
So we've laid the groundwork here. We've established an understanding of what a sensitive striver is, and we've discussed some of the potential pitfalls, like the honor roll hangover. Fortunately, Wilding doesn't leave us hanging.
She doesn't. She offers concrete strategies for sensitive strivers to break free from these negative patterns and truly thrive. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned, folks. We're about to uncover some incredible tools for harnessing your sensitivity and ambition in a way that paves the path to authentic success and well-being.
And it's so empowering to realize that these negative patterns aren't set in stone.
Right.
With the right tools, sensitive strivers can really reshape their experiences and create a more fulfilling path for themselves.
Absolutely. And one of the first tools that Wilding introduces is this idea of giving yourself permission.
Mm.
It might sound simple, but the impact can be really profound.
It is. It's about recognizing your own agency to make choices that align with your values and your goals, even if those choices go against societal expectations or what you think other people want from you.
And Wilding emphasizes that this permission can take many forms.
Right.
It could be allowing yourself to succeed, to make mistakes, or even just to be your authentic self.
Exactly.
And she shares a really interesting story about a guy named Travis,
Yes.
who was really struggling with this. He had all this expertise, but he was hesitant to launch his own consulting business because he felt like he needed to have every single detail perfectly planned out before he could take that first step.
It sounds like he was stuck in the cycle of seeking external validation rather than trusting his own judgment and abilities.
And Wilding helped Travis overcome this using a permission slip exercise,
Oh, wow.
which is essentially a written declaration where you formally give yourself permission to pursue a certain goal
Okay.
and acknowledge the fears and doubts that might come up along the way.
I love that. What a powerful way to shift your mindset and actually get yourself moving.
So can you talk a little bit about how this permission slip exercise can be applied in more practical, everyday situations?
Well, the beauty of it is that it's so versatile. You can use it for anything that feels daunting or outside of your comfort zone, whether it's speaking up in a meeting or taking on a new challenge at work.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about overthinking, which we touched on earlier.
Right.
It's something that so many sensitive strivers struggle with.
It's a constant battle.
And I imagine those thought patterns that we discussed, like disqualifying the positive or catastrophizing, they often fuel that overthinking spiral.
Absolutely. Wilding actually provides some really practical strategies for taming that overthinking beast.
Okay.
And a key first step is to become aware of your specific negative thought patterns. Once you can identify them, you can start to challenge and reframe them effectively.
And she gives an example of a woman named Cassie who, despite being really successful at work, felt like a total imposter.
Oh, wow.
She would consistently downplay any positive feedback that she received and just fixate on her perceived shortcomings.
So her story really illustrates how overthinking can trap you in this negativity loop. It's almost like you're seeing the world through a distorted lens where your flaws are magnified and your accomplishments are minimized.
And what are some techniques that people can use to reframe those negative thought patterns?
One effective method is to examine the evidence. Ask yourself, what are the facts? What concrete evidence supports or refutes this thought?
So it's about taking a step back and kind of looking at the situation objectively,
Right, rather than getting swept away by your emotions.
instead of just going with that initial feeling.
Exactly. Another helpful strategy is to explore alternative explanations.
Hmm.
So instead of automatically jumping to the worst case scenario, brainstorm other possibilities that might be more realistic.
And this reminds me of Wilding's advice to balance your thoughts. She suggests keeping a thought journal where you write down those negative thoughts and then actively counter them with more balanced perspectives.
That's such a great way to put it. It's about creating space between your thoughts and your reactions so you can make more conscious choices instead of just reacting impulsively.
So we've talked about permission, we've talked about overthinking. Now let's move on to one of the strengths that Wilding highlights for sensitive strivers, their intuition.
Ah, yes. It's like a superpower waiting to be unleashed.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because of their perceptiveness and ability to process information so deeply, sensitive strivers tend to have this really strong intuitive sense.
Right.
But I can imagine that they might struggle to trust their
Oh,
intuition.
absolutely. They have this internal compass, but they often second guess its guidance.
And Wilding shared an example of Liz Fosslian, who's the co-author of No Hard Feelings.
Yes.
Liz almost missed out on a huge career opportunity because she overanalyzed a major decision.
Oh, no.
And in the end, it was her gut feeling that led her to the right choice.
It's a perfect example of how important it is for sensitive strivers to learn to trust their intuition. It doesn't mean abandoning logic altogether, but it's about integrating those feelings with rational analysis.
And Wilding even suggests this simple exercise where you write down a yes-no question that's been on your mind,
Okay.
give it some space,
Yeah.
and then just instinctively circle your answer without overthinking it.
So you're tapping into that immediate intuitive response before the overthinking kicks in.
Right. So we've covered permission, overthinking, intuition. Now let's talk about boundaries,
Boundaries.
which seem particularly crucial for sensitive strivers,
They're essential.
especially because they're so in tune with the needs of others.
Exactly. Without boundaries, sensitive strivers can quickly become overwhelmed and depleted.
They might say yes to every request, take on too much responsibility, or constantly try to please everyone else.
Right, all while neglecting their own needs.
And Wilding emphasizes that setting boundaries isn't about being selfish or unkind.
No, not at all.
It's about protecting your energy and well-being so you can show up as your best self in every area of your life.
I love that.
And she introduces a really practical tool called the 4 feelings test.
Okay, tell me more about that.
It's very simple. If you're experiencing tension, resentment, frustration, or discomfort in a particular situation, that's a sign that you might need a boundary.
Interesting. Those feelings act as warning signs that you're pushing yourself too far.
Exactly. And once you recognize those feelings, you can start taking steps to address the situation, like saying no to requests, delegating tasks, or setting clearer expectations with people.
And Wilding provides a great example of a woman named Jessica who was feeling incredibly resentful because work was constantly bleeding into her family time.
It's so common.
It is. And by setting clearer boundaries with her team and her boss, she was able to restore that balance and feel much more fulfilled.
And Jessica's story is a great reminder that boundaries aren't just about work-life balance.
Right.
They're about creating a life that truly aligns with your values and priorities.
Absolutely.
So we've covered a lot in this segment. Permission, overthinking, intuition, boundaries.
It's a lot to process.
And Wilding goes on to explore the importance of core values, which we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive, along with some practical strategies for goal setting and finding a work environment that truly supports sensitive strivers. Welcome back to our exploration of Trust Yourself, where we're uncovering these variable insights for sensitive strivers. We've already talked about those defining qualities and some of the challenges that they face. But now, let's turn our focus to something really foundational: core values.
Identifying and really embodying your core values. It's so important for everybody, but it holds this particular significance, I think, for sensitive strivers. It's almost like having an anchor in this, turbulent sea of emotions and external pressures.
I love that analogy. How do these core values practically guide sensitive strivers in their daily lives?
Well, core values really provide that stability in the midst of all the fluctuations that come with that heightened sensitivity. So instead of being, swept away by those reactive emotions, you have this grounding force to always come back to. It's like this compass that guides your choices.
So instead of constantly reacting to all that external stuff, you have these internal principles.
Exactly. And that connection to your core values can also help mitigate all that overthinking. When you have clearly defined values, it provides this framework for decision making and it reduces the need to just endlessly analyze every single option.
Right. It's like having a filter to sift through all the noise
Mhm.
and help you prioritize what truly matters.
Wilding also talks about how core values can really empower you to show up authentically. So instead of trying to conform to those external expectations, you're guided by those internal principles, and it leads to a much more genuine and fulfilling experience.
And ultimately, I imagine, to a greater sense of purpose and meaning.
Exactly, both personally and professionally. And that leads us to another interesting point. Using those core values to redefine success. So instead of chasing that external validation, you're measuring your achievements against your own internal
I
standards.
like that a lot.
Yeah, it's about what truly matters to you. And Wilding shares this story of Catherine, who found herself really conflicted by a colleague's behavior that totally clashed with her core value of commitment.
Hmm.
And by recognizing that misalignment, she was able to establish clearer boundaries and really advocate for her own needs.
And it sounds like Catherine's experience is a good example of how empowering it can be to align your actions with your values.
It is. It brings clarity and purpose to your choices so you can navigate these difficult situations with integrity.
All right, well, let's transition now to another area where sensitive strivers often face difficulties: goal setting. It's not about a lack of ambition. It's more about finding this sustainable way to achieve those goals without burning out.
Right, and sometimes they set these really lofty expectations and then become discouraged by any kind of setback or constantly compare themselves to others. It can create this cycle of frustration and self-doubt.
And Wilding actually introduces this framework called commit, challenge, crush it to address those specific challenges.
Yeah, and it's this tiered approach that starts with these small, attainable goals and gradually builds momentum towards those larger aspirations.
So the commit level focuses on establishing some foundational habits and experiencing those early successes
Yeah.
to kind of fuel the motivation.
Exactly. Those are goals that you feel really confident in accomplishing. They build that sense of achievement and propel you forward.
Then there's the challenge level, where you're pushing yourself a little bit beyond your comfort zone.
Right. So those goals, they're still within reach, but they require more effort, a willingness to stretch those capabilities.
And then finally, you have that crush it level. And that's where you tackle those big, ambitious goals that initially seemed really daunting.
And by progressively working your way up through those levels, you avoid getting overwhelmed and you're able to cultivate that resilience throughout the process.
Wilding gives this great example with Kelly, who really wanted to join the board of a nonprofit organization,
Hmm.
but it seemed like this massive goal. So she strategically broke it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
And Kelly's story just shows how this tiered approach can make even the most ambitious goals feel possible.
All right, well, we've talked about core values, goal setting. Let's wrap up with something that is really crucial for sensitive strivers: finding a work environment that truly supports their unique needs.
It's not just about finding a job, it's about finding a role, a workplace culture that truly aligns with your personality, your values, your sensitivities.
And I think this idea of fit is especially important for sensitive strivers because they are so in tune with their surroundings.
Absolutely. Wilding actually introduces a framework called the Sensitive Strivers Hierarchy of Professional Needs, and it starts with those fundamental needs,
Okay.
like having a physically comfortable and safe workspace where they can really feel at ease.
Makes sense. And then you move up to relational needs, which is about having those supportive colleagues, feeling valued, having a sense of camaraderie within the team.
Then it goes to those growth needs.
Yeah.
So, are there opportunities for learning, for developing new skills, for advancing in your field?
And lastly, we reach those health and lifestyle needs because well-being is so important for long-term success.
Absolutely. And Wilding encourages people to really reflect on their personal needs within each of these levels. It's about understanding what truly matters to you in your professional life.
And it sounds like the message here is to be proactive. So initiating those conversations with your manager, looking for new opportunities, or even considering a career change.
If that's what you need.
if that's what you need. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into trust yourself. We've learned so much about sensitive strivers, those defining qualities, the unique challenges, and the empowering strategies they can use to thrive.
And for those of you listening who resonate with this sensitive striver profile, I highly recommend checking out Melody Wilding's work. She provides some really practical advice and relatable stories that can make a real difference.
Absolutely. Now, as we wrap up this episode, let's distill the key takeaways into 10 essential points for sensitive strivers.
Okay, number one, embrace your sensitivity. See it as a strength, not a weakness.
I love that. Number 2, manage overthinking. Develop some strategies to tame that inner critic.
Number three, trust your intuition. Learn to listen to those gut feelings.
Number 4, set healthy boundaries. Protect your energy and your well-being.
Number five, honor your core values. Let them guide your choices and your actions.
Number 6, redefine success. Define it on your own terms, based on what matters most to you.
Number seven, set realistic goals. Remember that commit, challenge, crush it framework.
Right. Number 8, cultivate self-compassion. Treat yourself with kindness and understanding.
Number nine, seek supportive environments. Find workplaces that really value your sensitivity.
And finally, number 10, embrace your authenticity. Let your unique talents and perspectives shine through.
And there you have it, 10 powerful insights for sensitive strivers.
And as we conclude this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. We've been talking about how individuals can kind of navigate their sensitivity and their ambition, but how can we create a world that really values and supports sensitive strivers? How can we foster workplaces and communities where they can truly thrive and make their unique contributions? Something to think about as you continue on your journey of embracing your authentic, sensitive, striving self. Until next time, keep diving deep.